What's up, leader, and welcome to another episode of the L3 Leadership Podcast, where we are obsessed with helping you grow to your maximum potential and to maximize the impact of your leadership. My name is Doug Smith, and I am your host, and we recorded this episode live from our Burgo Realty Studios. If you're new to the podcast, welcome. I'm so glad that you're here, and I hope that you'll enjoy our content and become a subscriber. And if you've been listening to the podcast for a while and it's made a difference in your life, it would mean the world to me if you'd leave us a rating and review, so thank you in advance for that. And in this week's episode, you're going to hear my conversation with Dr. Josh Axe. And if you don't know Dr. Axe, you need to know him, and please go out and follow him. He has tons of incredible content. And in this episode, we specifically discuss his new book, which is called Think This, Not That. We talk all about his story and how he got involved with functional medicine. We talk about ways to raise a healthy family and much, much more. Dr. Josh Axe, you've been on my bucket list for quite a while to interview, and I'm so glad we finally got to do this. Welcome to the L3 Leadership Podcast.
Doug, thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Yeah, so I want to cover 1,000 things with you, but first I want to dive into, you have a brand new book coming out, and so why don't you just tell us a little bit about the book and what you want readers to get out of it?
Yeah, so the new book's called Think This, Not That. It's all about how to overcome limiting beliefs and become become our greatest selves. You know, I think for a lot of people, we focus on, hey, what can I accomplish versus who can we become? And so in the book, I really lay out, here's how you become the greatest person. How do you grow in virtue? How do you grow your skills to the highest level possible so you can operate as someone like an Elon Musk or in the past a Michelangelo, where you are the best and the best at your art, at leadership, at whatever God has designed you to do. And so, anyways, the book, I've had so many people already give me great feedback on the book, saying, man, this book is unlike any other. And so if anybody wants to check it out, it's bookstores nationwide, Amazon.com. It's called Think This, Not That. But yeah, it's really about mindset medicine. You know, one thing that I discovered over the years is that while food is medicine is powerful, our mindset and our beliefs are the most powerful thing for us achieving greater health goals, but also achieving greater success in relationships and a number of things. So I really dig into the book. I'd say it's the sort of the quintessential book on how to overcome limiting beliefs, expose those, create those new beliefs to create a better life.
Yeah, and I would be curious to hear your perspective on your own personal experience. Obviously, you've built a global brand. You're known everywhere. I'm sure that you've had to overcome significant, beliefs in your life. What are some of the moments in your life or career that you've had to make that jump and leap, or what did that look like?
Yeah, well, I'll hit on a couple of them. One of them was when I was in high school. So I was in freshman English class, and I had a teacher, her name was Miss Noble, and she said, "Hey, Josh, would you stay after class?" And I said, and that's never good, okay, especially with a kid who was always in trouble in elementary school. And so I stayed after, and she said, "Hey, what do you want to do when you grow up? You know, do you want to go to college?" And I said, "Yeah." I said, I'd love to be a doctor." And she just laughed at me, and she goes, "You'd never get into med school." And by the way, the reason I said that was my mom was diagnosed with cancer the year before, went through chemotherapy. And I just really, as I saw my mom go through chemo, I had this thing where I said to myself, I never want to see anyone have to go through that again. And I also said, there has to be a better way for someone to actually get healthy. So at the time, I was very aware that I wanted to help people get healthy. So I said that. She laughed at me. I remember just walking out of there just very downtrodden, very discouraged. And then a couple of weeks later, my mom brought me to a physician who diagnosed me with ADHD. And of course, acting like I wasn't in the room, he said, "You know, your son has ADHD. He's always going to have trouble learning his whole life. I'm going to prescribe Ritalin." And I never got on the medication. But from that time on in high school, I sort of just stopped trying. You know, I basically just passed so my dad wouldn't discipline me or get too angry. I graduated high school barely, by the way. I barely graduated with like a C minus. And then I decided I did want to go to college. The only way I got into a college, the college that I kind of, it wasn't even my first choice, but a college I wanted to go to was because they had this summer enrollment program where they said, hey, if you get above a 3.0 or better on 4 classes, we will let you into the school. And so I went there, and my first class I took was English 101. Okay, so for college. So I went and I said, I'm going to try because I don't want to be the kid that just fails out and has to live with their parents and whatever. So I went in there and I really tried. And I had the teacher, her name was Miss Williams, after we turned in our first paper. And a few days later, she said, hey, Josh, would you stay after class? I'm like, oh, gosh, this is deja vu. And she said, hey, I want to let you know you got the highest grade in the class. And I think you should, she said, have you ever thought about being an English major and a writer? And I said, no, I didn't know what else to say. Just no, hadn't crossed my mind. She said, well, hey, you should consider it. I think you've got a real talent as a writer. And I said, okay. And I walked out of there. And I had this thing happen at that point in time where I kind of call it a sort of I'll call it a memory transplant or a mindset transplant. I had this thing where for 4 years, I thought I was stupid. Like I just had this thing, I'm not smart. Why even try if I'm going to fail anyways? And just decide I'm just going to live getting C's and D's. And then finally I got in and I had one teacher tell me, you know what? You have this skill and this gift, and you should invest in being better at it. And from then on, like I want to say I had a 3.1 GPA then. I went on and got a doctorate. I graduated Johns Hopkins with a 3.9 GPA with a master's in organizational leadership there as well. And all that being said, and then I was able to, by the way, I hope I don't sound like I'm boasting. I just wanted to share kind of how far I think someone can go. I went from being in high school to literally barely graduating to at a point where I built 5 multimillion-dollar businesses. One's called Ancient Nutrition. It does over 100 million in sales. Again, a number of these things. And more importantly, I've got great relationships. I feel like I am and have this belief that I am wise and have great abilities now. But you know what? If I would have just lived with that one limiting belief of I wasn't smart, I probably wouldn't have been able to do any of those things. And I think there's a lot of people, Doug, who they've had somebody in their past tell them one thing one time, and they've let that belief sort of grow and grow and grow to where they never go after their dreams. They never actually fully realize the greatest them of who they could become because of this memory. And the thing about this memory transplant is it's kind of like an organ. If you have a sick organ, like a sick heart, you can, people's lives are saved every day through organ transplants, right? And so it's a very similar thing. Is what I do is I go and I walk through how to do this in the book and a whole lot more. I go through people like Jamie Kern Lima, how she did this. She was actually an orphan and was told essentially, she was criticized for her looks and then built a $1 billion company. A lot of people, I go through how they did this, but this is just so important, Doug, for people to realize that we have these limiting beliefs. And if we don't create new empowering beliefs and know exactly how to grow those, most of us will never live up to our full potential.
At Endosha, we help transform visions into results. What does that mean? We often work with companies who are doing amazing things that have incredible products and services, but fail to communicate what they do properly and market themselves effectively. We passionately serve entrepreneurs, business leaders, and visionaries to see what's in their heart and their visions for the future come to life. We do that by providing fractional marketing leadership and creative execution all in one. That's what we call VCMO. With VCMO, you get a marketing director and a team of creative professionals to help execute all of your marketing needs, all for one monthly cost. How do we do all this? We do it 3 ways. Number 1, we get your vision. We get excited about your mission and your trajectory as a company and come alongside to see you go further, faster. 2, we have a team of talented strategists and creatives to get all of the work done. And 3, we flat out work freaking hard for you and your company. Reach out today. Let's start a conversation.
When Esther connected us, she said, like, you guys are going to be best friends. We basically have very, very similar stories. Barely graduated high school, never thought I'd amount to anything, wasn't planning on going to college. And yet I had 3 people, I won't go into all the details, but I had 3 specific leaders come into my life, cast a vision that I could be more than I was, that I could be a leader, that I could do great things. And that's all it took for, like you said, the mindset transplant. That's all it took for me, and turned my whole life around. And I'm living a life now that I never, ever would have dreamed possible. If it weren't for those people. So one, I'm curious, did you have through that, I hear a lot about kids who grew up maybe with that mentality, have a chip on their shoulder, and how that can be an advantage in going out and achieving things. Did you feel like you had a chip on your shoulder at all when you started to get that? And has that helped you, grow and scale your businesses? Or do you feel like it was just that positive belief that you could do it?
No, I'm actually not wired like that to have a chip on my. Now, listen, some people do, and they use that, and they've built incredible companies and done a lot in their life. But no, for me, I think for me there was no chip. There was just a realization that I've always had this thing inside me, for the most part, that I want to live my best life possible. I went to a Christian school. And I was raised with a certain level of faith and believing that I'm going to live this life and I'm also going to live for eternity. And so I want to live my best life possible. So for me, there's no chip. There's just I want to accumulate awards in heaven. And even more than that, like I want to add value to people. I believe I'm called to do three things: love God, love people, make earth a heavenly place. And if there's a fourth, have disciples and help mentor others to living their best life. And so for me, no chip. I just want to add the most value possible and live and do the most with my life here and now.
Yeah. Well, I love that. And I would love to hear how you did that. So talking about overcoming, negative core beliefs. So you graduate from college, you said you ended up scaling, I think, 5 multi-million-dollar companies. How, when this is a leadership podcast, when it came to leadership, how did you have to grow as a leader and overcome leadership mindsets that maybe you had growing up to be able to grow and scale the way you have?
Yeah, well, one of the things I picked up about leadership, I think early on, was that there's really a yin yang. There's really a healthy balance of leadership if you're going to do it the right way. And it is, and by the way, a big part of my background in medicine has been Chinese medicine, which was sort of an extension of Tao or Tao. So, which basically, not to get into too many details here, but when you read, the Gospels and Jesus says, "I am the way, the truth." Well, the Tao means the way, and so I think these were kind of wisdom passed on from Abraham. But basically, it's yin and yang. It's the masculine, the feminine. It's the encouragement. So the positive side of leadership. It's like positive psychology. It's like, hey, you know what? You've got greatness in you. Hey, I want to let you know you've got great potential. And it's those sort of things where you're nourishing, right? It's more of that nourishment and love and kindness of leadership. But then there's the other side where it's that discipline, and it's like, you're better than this. You messed up. Hey, you know what? You can do better. You've got more inside you. And it's critiquing people in a constructive manner. And so all that being said, I think what I really learned about leadership is you really want to have a healthy balance of love and encourage and your team, but also, hey, you're better than that. Listen, we've got numbers we got to be driving towards. There's a level of discipline there. But I would say one of the biggest things that has really helped me build these $1 million businesses is something I go through in the book. And it's a process I go through, and it's called in chapter 10, it's visualization to realization. And I remember reading about when I used to be a full-time physician, I had an opportunity to work with some Olympic athletes like Ryan Lochte. I worked on him, and I would do muscle work and nutrition analysis and things like that for them. I also had a opportunity to talk with people like Michael Phelps. And one of the things I remember being at Michael Phelps, one of his meets, and he has always wears this hoodie before he'd go and swim, and he would just be looking, like staring at one area. And I remember seeing an interview where they said, "Hey, what are you doing when you're just staring off like that?" He's like, "I'm visualizing." And they said, "Well, are you just visualizing yourself winning that whole time?" He goes, "No, I'm visualizing everything. I'm visualizing when I start. I'm visualizing every single stroke and how it goes, the turn, exactly." He's like, "I'm visualizing every single moment of that swim." And Tiger Woods, Jack Nicklaus, I remember reading something from Jack Nicklaus, and he said he's never taken a shot or hit a ball without visualizing exactly where it would land.
Wow.
And so all that being said, I think this is such an important, and by the way, this is a biblical principle as well. I mean, God says to Abraham, "Look at the stars of the sky, so numerous shall your descendants be." So I think this is a principle that's important for our entire lives, but for our businesses, it's important as well. So this process, before visualization, I actually start with prioritization to say, what are the most important parts of the business? What are the things we must do to succeed? And what's our why behind the business, right? So really thinking about, like, for instance, when I started Ancient Nutrition, that business, I said to myself, okay, and part of that was a business right before that, DrAxe.com, which was an online supplement company as well. But I start off with saying, okay, what are our biggest priorities? We want to transform lives. We want people to be able to get off their medications, use supplements instead, that sort of thing. And so that's our why. Okay, so we have our priorities lined up, the things most important there. And then let's visualize, what do you want to visualize there? One thing I visualized both then and when I had my practice was people coming up to me and saying, "Dr. Axe, you changed my life. Thank you so much. I was able to reverse my diabetes, and I was able to heal naturally from whatever condition it might be." So I visualized exactly also what the supplements would look. I visualized them in Target and Costco and Whole Foods and Sprouts and all the places we're blessed to be in now. And then after visualizing that, I would sit down and write down they're really specific goals and strategies. Okay. So, hey, what are the goals with that? Okay. Well, we want to do, $100 million in sales by this date, but we want to do 50 million by this date. So I'd write down those goals. Then the next step was really strategy. Okay. Well, how do we achieve these goals? And I'll give you an example how we did this. One of my goals early on was to become the number one natural health website in the world, which in 2018, we were able to achieve. And so what I did there is I said, okay, who's the top person at the time? It was a guy named Dr. Joe Mercola. Dr. Oz was number 2. Anyways, there's a number of guys that were up there. And I said, okay, they're putting out about 21 articles a week. And I went and just saw what they did. And I said, okay, I'm going to start putting out 28 pieces of content a week. It'll be a mixture. We'll do articles. We're also going to do video, recipes, a number of things. And also, I'm going to make sure my content's better. So I combed through their content and then others as well and said, okay, here's how we create. And I sort of crafted the perfect article. We start here, we go to here, just created an outline that I thought would be different and better. And then we just started going at it, and we sort of engineered just a strategy for how we did the whole thing. And adjusted and improved along the way. And then we went into those kind of turned into our systems for, okay, this is the system for how to create the best article ever. Here's our system for social media. Here's our system for funnel marketing, which eventually became more flywheel marketing. And then we realized our potential. So all that being said, when I think about leadership, I do think that element, if I had to put one word to everything I shared, I think the biggest part of it is strategy of really saying, this is where I want to end up in 5 years. And really creating a step-by-step plan of here's exactly how we will achieve this over a 5-year process. I think a lot of leaders probably don't spend enough time getting into the nitty-gritty details of planning and then updating those plans as they have new findings along the way.
Yeah, you talked about content creation, and I love that you upped it to 28 articles a week over the other guys. You've built a personal brand. How important was building your own personal brand and creating content to the success that you saw? And what advice would you give to leaders today when it comes to creating their own personal platforms and or for their organization?
Well, I think it's incredibly important, actually even more important now than it's ever been because of social media. When you look at some of the biggest brands that are most successful, there is a person attached to those brands. I mean, of course, Elon Musk is the easiest. We talk about Tesla or X with that. But almost every big business, the CEO or founder is a celebrity. I mean, in some way, but it absolutely lifts the brand. Right now, I mean, the most effective form of marketing for a lot of people is influencer marketing, whether it be Instagram or YouTube or other. And so I think it's absolutely critical. And the great thing about it is if you have a person who is doing that, I think it actually creates greater safety for you in the future because organic traffic is not something that's going to be limited. I actually saw recently, just as a warning to everybody, that a lot of the social media platforms are going to possibly start allowing people to pay to be free of ads, right? I think YouTube might already do this, but Instagram's about to install it and some other platforms probably as well, to where if you are running ads, some people may pay $9 a month just to never see any ads. So they'll just never see your ads. All that being said, this is why building up organic traffic is so important in getting connected to influencers, because that's the future and that is something that likely won't be limited. And I can tell you before, because I've again, in building brands that like people today and younger generations, even more than now, they're very relationship driven. They want to feel a connection. And it's really hard to feel a connection with a brand versus a connection with a person. And so I do believe that this is the future of brands. Right now, something that's happening a lot too, a lot of influencers are getting equity in brands because businesses are realizing that if they're going to grow the brand, it needs to be attached to personalities. I mean, it's really, really important. And look at all these people today going off and just starting their own companies just because they've got a big brand. Tucker Carlson is an example of that, leaving Fox News, blowing up. It could be Megyn Kelly, it could be Glenn Beck. I'm using a lot of political people now, but my point there, I mean, look at Daily Wire, how much they've grown. Look at Valuetainment because of Patrick Bet-David. The reason they've grown is they've got really, really engaging influencers that have great personalities and great educators that are out there. So, one of the things that I am very conscious of is the way that I build my personal brand. And I want to encourage people, now listen, I want to say this. If it's not your gifting, then don't try and be that person. Okay. Don't try and be the person if you don't at least generally like being on video or posting on social or being that person, then find someone else to be that need. And you sort of can operate as that builder, that integrator, and have that other person sort of next to you that is the personality. So again, it doesn't have to be you, but I do think almost every business today would benefit greatly from having an influencer. And the way that we try and do this, I'll give you an example. So the average person is on 6 social platforms, not 1, 6. So you want to try and get your content out on multiple platforms. Now, let's say you could only do 1 hour a week. Here's what I would do. I'd record a 1-hour show like you're doing here, Doug. And then what I would do is I would hire a social person who then takes, let's say it's YouTube. That's your primary platform. They then take it and they put it on Spotify and iTunes. So they put it on podcasts. So now you're on 2 platforms. They then take it and they take all of the clips and they take your best clips from the 1-hour show. They take 5 of them. And those are broken down into 60-second shorts or reels that are then put on Instagram. Okay. Those same shorts and reels can then be posted on Facebook. You could then take that content and some of the best things said during the interview and post that on Twitter/X. And those same reels can also be posted on TikTok. So boom, there you have it. By the way, same thing on LinkedIn. You could actually take some of the best parts of it, transcribe it, and actually put that on LinkedIn. And it can be turned on an article and put on your website. You should do that. But you could have one employee, if they're very savvy and they know how to use technology such as whether it's ChatGPT or Claude or Bard, like one of those AI platforms. If you hire the right person, they can just full-time take 1 hour and put it on every one of those platforms. And then if you really feel like, this is really working, then you could record 2 days a week, and then amplify it even more. But that's what I would say is, I don't think enough entrepreneurs are they're not, it's that killing 2 birds with 1 stone. It's that, Brendon Burchard always called this, virality of taking that one thing and using it in every way you could possibly imagine. But that's what I would suggest. If people really want to know how do you really multiply your personal brand, you do something very similar to what I just shared.
Yeah, well, thank you for sharing that. And while I have you on the show, I'd be remiss not to talk to you a little bit about health. And, we're both passionate about leadership. One thing I'm extremely passionate about is helping leaders make it to their finish line, both from a character standpoint, that they don't, have moral failure and disqualify themselves, but also just that they build the kind of life that enables them to have longevity, health being a big part of that. I guess just open-endedly, why should leaders care about their health and fitness? And then we'll dive in from there.
Yeah, well, I think there's a few reasons. One is everyday performance, and the secondary one would be longevity. And so when we talk about everyday performance, we know via studies is that and there's a few books on this. There's a book I used to love called The Power of Full Engagement, and they got into sort of the importance of sort of both working hard and resting and taking care of yourself, because it does increase performance. If you ever get a terrible night's sleep, it's very hard to be creative and innovative. And I would actually argue that one of the most important things, if you want to be competitive or go past the competition, you need to practice some of that blue ocean strategy. There's a great book on this, but really being able to leverage being creative and innovative. And if you are not healthy and physically fit, you will be less creative and innovative. Look at all the people now that are really successful online building big brands. There's Alex Hormozi would be a great example of that. He's very into fitness. That's a big part of who he is and why he's successful. Of course, there's past people like Arnold Schwarzenegger. I mentioned Patrick Bet-David. Most of these people do take very good care of their bodies. And of course, there are people who didn't, like Steve Jobs is an example of this, but unfortunately, he's not here with us today. I think partly due to, I think that was actually probably as much due to stress as anything else. All that being said, I really believe that you will perform better, you will be more creative, more innovative, you'll have more energy, all of those things if you take care of your body. And some of it doesn't even take much more, it doesn't take any more time. The difference between if you're bringing, to lunch with you, a sandwich with some chips or eating a piece of pizza, if you instead pack, let's say, corn tortillas with chicken and you also have like a sweet potato or something like that. I mean, if you're just eating, the ideal diet for most people is meat, vegetables, some fruit, some healthy fat. And if you're going to have grains, a little bit of something like a rice or oatmeal. But for the most part, meat and vegetables, meat and vegetables, meat and vegetables. If you can do a lot of organic meat and vegetables, man, you're going to really, really get yourself in a healthy place, getting some of those good fats too, from things like olives and avocado and coconut, especially because it's so good for the brain to use as fuel. But yeah, I mean, there are plenty of clinical studies showing if you eat healthier, you are more productive at work. Also, you have lower rates of depression and anxiety, better mental health. You also are going to have greater levels of energy, less fatigue. You're going to sleep better, a number of things. So I would say that eating healthy, and then something as simple as going on walks. If you're at work and you go actually into work, even if it's cold out, going for about a 15 to 20 minute walk right after you eat, right after lunch, is amazing for what it does for your health. There's that ancient Chinese saying that 1,000 steps after a meal will help you heal. So just 1,000 steps after a meal. So just even walking has tremendous benefits. But all that being said, it makes a tremendous difference.
Yeah. And I know you've shared your story a million times, but for those listening who may be new to you, can you just briefly share the background why you got so passionate and why you even got into this industry to begin with, just to give some context for further questions?
Yeah, I mentioned this earlier with my the event that happened where I had the teacher tell me that I wasn't so smart, and basically I wanted to help people get healthy because my mom had cancer. So at 40 years old, my mom had breast cancer. I was in junior high at the time. And I still remember to this day my mom's hair falling out and her going bald, and just thinking to myself, there's got to be a better way. And my heart just breaking for her and thinking, I want to help people not have to experience this. And so anyways, that really set me on a path. And my mom was diagnosed as being cancer-free. The crazy part, though, after going through all the chemo treatments, she really seemed sicker than ever. She was later on diagnosed with chronic fatigue syndrome, hypothyroidism. She had chronic constipation and just depression and anxiety. She was on 3 medications for depression and anxiety. So my mom, just growing up, I just remember her just being sick constantly. And so I eventually went on to school to learn natural medicine. And a year before, right before I graduated, I get a call from my mom in tears. And she said, Josh, I've got bad news. I've just been diagnosed with cancer again. And they want to go and do surgery. It's on my lung. They want to do surgery and then actually do radiation treatments. I said, Mom, I'll be home. And we flew back. We prayed together. She felt really led, as I did, to take care of her all naturally. So we just radically changed her diet. We had her start juicing vegetables every single day, doing herbs like turmeric, mushrooms like reishi, doing lymphatic drainage massage. And we prayed for her. We believe that that's a big part of it. We really worked on her mindset. This is something I hit on the book as well, of how we battled cancer naturally in her mind. She would sort of visualize herself 25 years from then, bringing her grandkids to Disney World. She would visualize her white blood cells going and eradicating the cancer cells. So she followed this whole holistic protocol for 4 months. We went back to the oncologist and they did a CT scan, and they called us it was either the next day or the day after. And they said, hey, what have you been doing? And she shared, and she goes, And their exact words were, well, this is highly unusual, but your tumors have shrunk by more than half. They said, we want to see you again, several months from now. She went back about 9 months later, and she was in complete remission. And today she's in the best shape of her life. She's about 73, and she's bringing her grandkids to Disney World. My parents retired from Ohio down to Florida. They're loving life down there and doing really well. But I took those learnings and also applied that when I did run my functional medicine practice in the past. But it really sort of instilled in me the power of food as medicine and mindset medicine. I mean, these things are really important. And I don't think you want to just do one or the other. I think food is incredibly important to healing. But there's also a big emotional aspect of health. A lot of people don't realize how connected our thoughts and our emotions are to our physical health. Here's an example. The emotion of fear. Most of us know this one, but that's tied to your adrenal glands. If you get in a fight or flight state, your body starts producing cortisol and adrenaline. Those are hormones your adrenal gland produces that you get in that state. Well, if you live in that state all the time, you start getting adrenal fatigue, okay, and start getting worn out in that way. But other emotions affect other organs. Anger affects your liver. and it causes liver toxicity. Grief, if you're really tied to things that have happened in the past and you have not been able to let go of a personal trauma, physical trauma, something that happened years ago, that will affect your lungs and colon. It'll affect your immune system and can even cause autoimmune disease. Worry. We've all heard, most of us will recognize this one too. If you worry too much, you'll get an upset stomach. Okay. So that's tied to your upper digestive system. And then the emotion of anxiety. That will raise your blood pressure. Okay. So that's tied to your heart and cardiovascular system. So all that being said, most disease today is not due to genetics. Now, genetics are like a switch. You got to flip them on. Primarily what turns those genes on is unhealthy emotions and diet. So if you have these emotions where you foster and live in a state of anger or a state of living in the past, well, that's going to build up disease within specific organs there as well. So anyways, that's a little bit of sort of Chinese medicine for you, but that's how that works.
Oh, and this is huge. I was telling you a little bit before we recorded, just over 3, almost 4 years ago now, I what I would call a mental breakdown. And I think what you were saying, the adrenal fatigue. And basically, as I went to get help because I was desperate, went to therapy. I did everything you could possibly imagine to get help. Came out to find I lost my sister 9 months prior to that happening due to a drug overdose. I lost my mom when I was a teenager. I had just gotten into a new leadership role, felt a ton of pressure around that and stress. And, looking back, I could see all the signs leading up to that. Mm-hmm. But it was really hard to diagnose. And a lot of the things you're talking about, I had to learn how to deal with all of those things. And now, really looking out on the preventive side, I'm just curious if someone, because we're living in a mental health crisis, I work at a rescue mission, homeless shelter. We're seeing mental health issues like we've never seen before. I'm sure you're seeing the same thing. If someone's in a state of constant anxiety, stress, maybe they're experiencing what you're calling, adrenal fatigue, what would you encourage them to do to start to get help with those things?
Well, the one thing I'd recommend is this is something I cover in my book. Really, is how to break free of these issues. And so I'd go to Amazon, Think This, Not That. Check out the book, buy it, and I think people are going to be blown away by it. Now, right now, here's something else. Here's something within that I would do. I would write down memories and events that still bother you today. Okay.
Wow.
And it might have happened a month ago. It might have happened 30 years ago. Okay. But write down those events that are really still bothering you. And then I want you to write down why they still bother you and just write. Yeah. I mean, I think this exercise is so healthy and healing. Write down what is it about that event that bothers you? And then write down by you living in that state or not dealing with it, write down the negative effects, how it's affecting you. And then write down maybe a more positive perception. If you saw that event in a different light, from the most positive standpoint possible, what would that look like? So let me give you an example of this. One story you're going to write out as a victim. Another one you're going to write down as you're a hero overcoming all the obstacles. Okay. And so for instance, and by the way, this can be incredibly hard. Like if I, losing a family member, that's an example of this. I think and by the way, this is something I had to help my mom with recently. So let me give you an example of this. She lost her brother and it was really early. It was 59. He was out for a jog and his heart just stopped. And so with my mom, I said, Mom, she's still grieving over this. I said, let's write down what's bothering you about it. He was my best friend. He was, he way before his time. I told him not to go get this thing done and he did. And a number of things that sort of led to where he ended up and passing away. And it's unfair. Okay. What else? I'm angry with God that he let it happen. Okay. I mean, getting deep, like what are all the things, right? So do you blame yourself? Okay. You're blaming yourself. Okay. You're blaming your mom. You're blaming, God. So, okay, let's write down all these things. Okay. So you're seeing this right now of like, this is a victim. It's unfair, understandable. And you're okay to feel that way. Now let's do something really different though. Let's look at and write down let's look at this from a different perspective. What are all the positive things we could say about this? We believe Mark's in heaven now with God, and he's reunited with your dad. Okay. Mark added value to so many people. Okay. We realize that people are celebrating his life. Okay. We now have, I think, a greater understanding of the shortness of life, and we're now going to be more conscious of going and spending time with our kids. But my point here is, and I could go on and on for this, but I do think there's a lot of value in, and I would say this about almost everything in life. So many things are about the way we perceive them. If somebody, here's an example. If I'm in a room with somebody and I am there with, let's say I have a friend there, and I have somebody say, hey, Josh, actually, you're a real, jerk. You're a snake oil salesman. Who knows? They could say anything. If I'm operating in my highest state of awareness, what I will do is there's a couple ways I could handle this. One is, this person's attacking me right now. I'm going to attack them back. But a higher level is, this person must really be hurting. What can I say? Wow. What is the most loving thing I can say right now to help them grow themselves, to help them break free of this hurt that they've had in the past? You know what? Hey, I know that you feel that way, but you know what? That's not my intention. And by the way, I really think we can be friends, and I would love to see how I can add value to your life. My point there is that so much of mental health is our perception of things.
Wow.
I think now there is a level of putting too much weight and stress on yourself, but the closest I've ever been to a mental breakdown, and I haven't had one, but the closest I was when I started seeing patients in clinic for the first time when I was a student. I remember going into my pastor after doing this for a while, and I couldn't look him in the eye. It was weird. I was having a really hard time looking him in the eye, anyone in the eyes, but him as well. And I said, Larry, he was, by the way, he was this amazing old pastor who was just, he taught in seminary school, had a beard, he surfed, just was awesome. And so he would always just have you sit there until you finally just broke down, And so I'm sitting there and I'm like, Larry, I feel so much weight on me right now that I actually feel like I probably should cry, but I can't even do that. I feel like I would just break if I started crying now. It would just crush me. And he goes, well, why is that? And I just started talking, and eventually I realized, I said, you know what? I feel like I keep telling patients what they need to do, and a lot of them aren't doing it, and they're not seeing the results. Like they're not, I think this guy, I know he can reverse his diabetes, but he's just not doing it. And he's like, you know what, Josh, that's not your job. Your job is not to change people. Your job is just to care for them. Your job is to lay out a plan for them and help them see exactly what they should do, but you can't make them do it. You can't control them. And so I had this perception or this idea that my role in the situation was to actually change the person. And if that person didn't change radically, I was a failure. Versus I realized, no, if I just love them and have great character and care for them well and give them the plan and every step they need to have, if I'm a good leader, that's my job. That's my job, is not to change them. My job is to challenge them and care for them. And so anyways, that's one thing I would say for people out there, is that sometimes if you're feeling a lot of mental stress, oftentimes you don't have the right perception. Now, the other thing I would say is this, as I've come across and looked a lot more at mental health, for some people, it's more of and this is still tied in, but it's an identity issue. And your identity is tied into three things really affect your identity. It's your community, it's your roles, and your responsibilities within that community. So for example, if I want to have, because a lot of mental health is due to the highest issues are isolation, depression, anxiety. Those are some of the things that fall under that category. But I think a lot of people are depressed today because they don't have their purpose, which stems from identity. Only 25% of people know what their purpose is, according to a recent study. So it's very, very low. But for myself, I'll give you an example, not even a career, but as a dad, like there are different levels of your identity. The lowest level of identity of a father would be, to impregnate a woman. That's all I needed to do to be a dad. Is that conception, boom, I'm done, I can run off. And so that's a very low level. So your role is, you don't have a role hardly. You're just, just impregnate somebody, have sex, boom, that's it. Okay. What's a higher level than that today? Well, let's say more of a traditional role of a male of saying, you know what, my role of a father is to provide for my family. That's the big thing, which is amazing, but I'm going to provide financially. Okay. Now let's go a whole nother level up though, as identity. Okay. As a role within this context of community as a family, it's tapping into the divine. Okay. I've got a Father in heaven who loves me. I realize that he's given everything for me. He wants me to grow. He wants me to be like Christ. So there's that. So I'm getting poured into from that angle. And so my goal with my kids, my identity as a father is, I'm raising up world changers to be like Christ. I'm going to find out their greatest talent. and I'm going to do everything I can to be the best. If my kid's great at art, I would do everything I can to help them be the next Michelangelo. If my kid, and the other thing is helping them grow in character, becoming more virtuous. I'm going to help them be more generous and kind. And so as a father, I'm going to pour into them that way and disciple them, and knowing that's not only going to impact them for now, it's going to impact them for eternity and every generation after them. So if that's my mentality as a father, if that's what I'm called to do, it gives my life so much meaning, knowing I'll live with my kids forever in heaven. So I know I've brought in some biblical ideas here and thoughts, but this is who I am. And so I just wanted to share those things. But I do think if you want to have great mental health, tap into who God created you to be. What's your identity as a father, we're talking about males here. I know there's probably a lot of women that listen, but for me, it's my role as a husband, my role as a father, my role as a child of God, my role as a leader and a boss of my organization. What's my greatest level of meaning in that role? What does that look like? And so I think that's another critical component. This is something I get into in my book, Think This, Not That. Exactly how you develop that type of identity. And that's one of the chapters, actually, we mentioned Esther earlier. She's like, I've never read a chapter like this that so clearly defines your identity and how to live that out.
That's so good. You mentioned kids. How many kids do you have?
2. In fact, I have a 3.5-year-old, but we just had a newborn here recently. So I've got she's almost 4, and then we got a few months, a month old. So
yeah, I'm curious. I'm a dad of 4 under 7. Same vision with my kids. Love it. I just always love asking dads in the middle of it, like, what do you learn? What's working for you guys, parenting wise?
Yeah, I think that I actually think parents, I think it's leadership. And so I think there's 2 things I'm conscious of when I'm with my 3-year-old right now. I am going to, and I started off saying this, I'm going to love her and encourage her. And by the way, I'm really going to be an identity builder for her. Arwen, you are kind. Arwen, you are loving. You are generous. So if Arwen does something and takes a toy from somebody, I would say something like, Arwen, listen, we don't do that, because you are generous and you are kind, and God loves it when we share, and we love it when we share, right? So would you share so there's that level, and there's also the level if she doesn't do it, just letting her know, listen, Arwen, I know you decided not to do this right now, or we talked about this, but I know you are kind, I know you are generous, and I know and I believe next time you will be. So I think there's this level of sort of like both nurturing her, but also challenging her. I think as well, the other day, she didn't want to leave the playground, even though we were there for all day. And so, and just total breakdown before we got in the car. And I said, I look her in the eyes. That's the other. My wife actually taught me to do this, and this is really good. No matter what, we just do everything we can to look her in the eyes and say, Arwen, we try and recognize what she's feeling and let her know, hey, Arwen, it's been really fun today, hasn't it? I know. It's been so fun. Daddy has loved it. I've loved playing with you. I've loved going down the slide with you. And you know what? I want to do this again tomorrow. Do you? Okay. We have to go home now. It's getting dark and cold outside, but we can, and I think just that level of just being able to recognize what she's feeling right now. You want to have fun and you don't want to leave. I understand. It's hard. And so I think there's what we really try and do, my wife and I, we try and find our kids' greatest skills. Like, she's a great swimmer, do everything we can to help her get better at that. We try and help our kids grow in character, and we try and connect with them in the eyes, an emotional level, on a regular basis, having those deep, engaging conversations, saying we're here. And so that's, I think a big part of where we're at right now.
Yeah. And speaking of health, obviously, so I'm in a stage probably for the past decade where I'm just trying to optimize my health all the time. Yeah. Obviously, you said leadership in the family. I would just be curious, how are you and your wife thinking about your kids, or how do you raise healthy kids as far as what they're putting in their body? What are you guys thinking? I'm just curious because, do you have any hacks as far as great snacks or things that you would feed your kid? Because it's hard. I mean, I'm sure you guys are the same. We're both super busy, on the fly all the time. And so, I would just be interested in your insight there.
Yeah. So, we try and get as much food in the pot as possible, and we try and do less snacks. That's one. You can have snacks. You just have to eat your food. You can have dessert. You just have to eat your food. So we always little treats, things like that. If she eats, our daughter's diet is meat, vegetables, fruit, meat, vegetables, fruit, meat, vegetables, fruit. That's what she's eating pretty much all day long. And so, and by the way, she does that because that's what Chelsea and I eat all day long. And so your kids will eat what you eat. And the earlier you can start them off on eating the right food, the better. I mean, if you start them off on bad stuff and doing a lot of snacks early on, it's hard to, but you just have to kind of stand your ground and say, I'm the parent here. I'm doing what's best for you. Part of discipline. I mean, that's what you have to do is you need to be disciplined in what you're giving your kids. So, I think for our daughter, I mean, she eats what we eat. I think in terms of hacks, we'll do smoothies. We'll throw a handful of spinach in there, get berries, coconut milk, bone broth, protein, or collagen in there that's flavored. Rather than giving our daughter juice all the time, we tend to do this collagen. It's by Ancient Nutrition supplement company. And we have the strawberry lemonade. So we put just a little bit of that in with water. So she drinks that all day long. So that's a hack to get some really good protein and collagen in her diet. Sometimes she'll do a chicken nugget, right? We'll just buy the best version of one we can from Whole Foods Market or Sprouts. And she'll do that. We have a lot of snacks. She does a lot of dried cherries. We have these like snack bars, like Go Macro or Cerebelli, I think is the other brand. She does a lot of food packs that are made of like fruit and coconut milk. So we have her doing those all day. So we do have her doing some snacks. They're all food. They're all real food snacks. So we do quite a bit of those. And there are some great books that have kids' recipes. I mean, we do a lot of spaghetti, but like when we buy spaghetti, we'll buy rice noodles or Ezekiel noodles. We do pizza. My wife's into making sourdough bread. So we'll do actually tomorrow, we'll do the sourdough bread pizza where we buy goat cheese or sheep cheese or at least organic mozzarella. So we don't eat perfect, but we make a lot of food at home. We make it a family affair where we're making stuff together. And if we do order out, maybe we're trying to order a place like Kava, a place that does healthy bowls, or a Vietnamese restaurant that does rice noodles and pho, or anyways, there's a lot of, I'm trying to think of some of the places in Nashville. We'll do more of a grass-fed burger from a place. So, I mean, we definitely order in or do DoorDash sometimes. But I think we're just really aware that we're trying to get as much real food in her diet as possible. And listen, on occasion, if she would go to a birthday party, I'm not going to encourage her to eat cake. But if she only has it once a month, Chelsea and I are probably a little lax in saying, have it the one time. This isn't really good for you. But if you have it just once, it's fine. And I guess that's our general philosophy.
What you mentioned treats. So are you guys basically from the viewpoint, like no sugar whatsoever? I'm just curious what do treats look like? Okay.
Yeah, we use honey. We use maple syrup. We use a little bit of monk fruit, stevia. Now those are less calorie or no calorie. But yeah, we use honey and stevia, on occasion coconut sugar. But so no. Listen, I'm not no sugar. I'm not I don't think keto is good for most people. I wouldn't give it to kids. Unless they had epilepsy or something like that, where we really have to do something to retrain the nervous system. But no, we do a little bit of sugar. It's not a high sugar diet. I mean, the sugar that our ones get is from fruit. That's where she's getting her, and maybe a little bit of honey if we make a pumpkin pie, we'll use honey, or even chocolate chip cookies. Or pancakes, we put a little bit of honey in that. But really, her sweeteners are honey and fruit.
Okay. Well, hey, we're coming to a close for our time, so I'll just leave this really open-ended. Anything else on your heart for leaders today?
Oh man, I could just go and go and go. So that's a tough thing for me. I'll say this. I think that if you want to grow to the highest level possible, and I know we probably have some CEOs on here, executives, people just anywhere in business. There's probably some entrepreneurs on here. And people just generally wanting to grow in leadership. But I would say grow yourself. I think that's something I'm keenly aware of. But don't just grow yourself. Here's how I think about this. What I try and do is I try and master one topic and go really deep there for a period of time. So let me give you an example. It could be, let's say it's leadership. Let's say this year for you, it's leadership. Or let's say it's mindset. So you want to really grow in mindset. What I would do is write down, hey, what are 5 to 10 to 12 leadership or mindset books you want to read? Okay, so you got those. What are some podcasts you want to listen to? What are some social channels you want to follow? And what I try and do is I will then go through all those topics, and then I'll create presentations on them. So for instance, somebody could read my book, Think This, Not That. They can go through the whole book. What I do every time, by the way, when I read a book, even if it's an audio book, I will take notes. So I'll highlight and then I'll type them out. because I'll remember them better. And then oftentimes I'll turn it into a presentation and go over that with my team or send it out to people, use it in some way. And I probably retain 90% of what I read because I take the note and I type it out and then I put it into a PowerPoint and then I teach on it. So I remember almost all of it versus most people might only remember 10% of what they read. And so that's something Michael Hyatt, a good friend of mine, taught me how to, really taught me how to do. And it was really benefited me greatly. So I would say go deeper. A lot of us kind of stay superficial. Maybe we read a lot, but it's just a lot of things and it's a spattering things here or there. You'll learn a lot more if you take one topic and go really, really deep on that topic. And work on mastering that topic. By the way, here's an example in my career. I'll just give you an example. In my career early on, I was known as the real food guy. Okay, so Dr. Axe teaches you how to eat real food. Okay, and then later on, I started a program called the Secret Detox. There's a detox program. I was known as the Detox Doc. And then I came out with this program called Healing Leaky Gut, and people started saying, "Oh, he's the gut expert." Well, then I did a program on essential oils, and I was like, oh, he's the essential oils guy. Well, then I eventually did one on keto and wrote a book on it and did a deep dive there. And then it was the ancient nutrition or collagen doctor. Here's the thing. I think a lot of times people just try and do everything. You're a lot better off if you absolutely focus on, I'm going to master it. So when I studied essential oils, I read everything there was about essential oils, textbooks, regular books, articles, medical journals. I read everything. So after a year, I really knew essential oils well. If I was on a podcast, I could, as good as almost anybody in the world, share, what are the benefits of essential oils or whatever it might be. So I think a lot of time in life, we don't go deep enough of saying, I'm going to work on mastering this one topic over the next 6 months or year or 3 years. Think about it. If somebody would do this in the field of leadership, let's say I want to do that in leadership, and I'm going to read a book a month for the next 3 years. And they read 36 books. And not just 36 books, they'd taken notes on those, plugged them into and by the way, maybe you have your team plug it into a PowerPoint, maybe. And when I listen to an audiobook, what I'll do is I'll stop it. And then I have my notes open and I'll voice out what I just heard or something similar to what I just heard. And then that'll turn into my notes. So I do this while I'm listening to an audiobook and while I'm actually reading a book. But if you read 36 books on leadership and had 36 presentations based off of a book you read, you'd be in the top 1 in 10,000 people in leadership, or 1 in 100,000 more likely of experts in that area. So that's what I would suggest is pick, what is the one thing? Is it mindset? Is it leadership? Is it a subcategory of that? Is it limiting beliefs? Is it identity? Is it psychology? Whatever it is, go super, super deep on that topic. And it's actually easier then to get booked on podcasts. It's easier to present once you really have mastered that topic. So that's what I would say I'd encourage everybody to do. And I actually go through a little bit more in my book, Think This, Not That, sort of my process of exactly how I do that in different topics and lay that out. But that's what I would encourage everybody to do.
Yeah, well, this has been great. And again, Think This, Not That. We'll include a link to everything in the show notes that Dr. Axe talked about. Also, you have your own podcast. You want to give a quick plug for that? People can connect with?
Yeah. My podcast is The Dr. Axe Show. I have a lot of people follow on YouTube because it's a video show as well. So you can just go to YouTube and search Dr. Josh Axe, find the podcast. We've had some great guests. Had Dave Ramsey on, Tim Tebow, Carrie Underwood, all kinds of people, a lot of people that are leadership focused, Donald Miller, Michael Hyatt, a lot of others. And so I think you'd really enjoy that podcast. On social media, I'm saying Instagram, you could follow, or Facebook, or whatever social platform you're on, Dr. Josh Axe. And again, the book is Think This, Not That. It's Amazon.com. And by the way, if you go and get the book, you could just go to joshaxe.com. And I also have a free mindset masterclass, and it's a 3-part video series that if you go on there and get the book through that, we give you the whole master. It's a $200 value. You actually get it for free if you go on through joshaxe.com. So, Doug, thanks so much for having me on. This has been a lot of fun. I love what you're doing with leadership. So thanks again.
Yeah, likewise. And on behalf of millions of people that you've helped, thank you for just following God's plan for your life, obeying that. And I can't wait to see how he uses you in the years to come. Thanks again. Well, hey everyone, thank you so much for listening to my conversation with Dr. Axe. I hope that you enjoyed it as much as I did. You can find ways to connect with him and links to everything that we discussed in the show notes at l3leadership.org/415. Again, I want to thank our sponsor, Andosha Marketing Solutions. They are the producers of this podcast, and if you are looking for help with your organization's marketing, I cannot recommend them enough. They're great friends and they do incredible work. You can check them out at andosha.com. That's ANDOCIA.com. And as always, I like to end every episode with a quote. And today I'll quote Paulo Coelho, who said, "The world is changed by your example, not by your opinion." So good. That's going to wrap up today's podcast. As always, leader, remember, don't quit. Keep leading. The world desperately needs your leadership. We'll talk to you next episode.